that had water in it.
That's right. That was,
And,
yeah.
and it was a trying time for a lot of ages. But going to this prison setup, being right at the walls of a maximum security prison, was really was a very trying time. And then I had to go down to this basement that was only about this high. So I was hunched over. Okay. So what I was going to do was give you a copy of it because it's the clearest exposition of the three problems. Okay. And at least you'll have something to look at
Sure.
occasionally. Say, look, I don't understand that, or someone saying one thing, and that's as objective as I could possibly do it. There's nothing in it that's not documented that I know of. I mean, everything that I have seen in that document is really
Yeah.
clear now.
Yeah, Ray Shedley did do this demonstration for me with the sort of going from.
Oh, see, that's one of the three things.
Yeah.
That's
sounds very interesting.
okay.
Underhanded, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's one of the three things. The number 3 in this list is actually the biggie, the one that the government thinks, and apparently the jury agreed, has me in prison. That's this one it starts. The third and most discussed issue is the pajama top so-called demonstration.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was for you. This is a book report that I thought you would like for your own purposes. You may know all about it. I didn't know anything about it anymore. I saw it. I just thought you might like to see that book report. So that's yours. It's a strange.
Where is that from?
It's from JAMA, Journal of
Uh-huh.
American Medical Association. They're just doing a review on that book on Freud.
Right. For interesting. Thank you.
And this is in regards to a comment that you and I have passed back and forth in regards to emergency service. And in it, this guy is discussing the New York grand jury report and what is coming out of that. And strangely, in the same issue is an unusual ad for, Columbia Presbyterian, one of the major university hospitals looking for emergency physicians. And it's so unlike them to put an ad in a journal. So what I'm saying is I was laughing when I saw this, and then like 20 minutes later, as I'm at the end of another same journal, these are both from the Annals of Emergency Medicine, in the same journal, they have an ad looking for emergency physicians. So apparently they're all learning, including the major university centers, that they have to start doing the right thing. But I thought you'd be interested in that because we had mentioned comments, in that area.
Yeah. That was such an awful thing, that New York hospital case.
Terrible. Terrible.
Young woman.
Yeah, just awful.
And there must be lots of them. It's only because the father was a writer that.
Oh, absolutely. This happens all the time at county hospitals where the main population is ethnic and poor.
Yeah. And
they have no advocate for them. It happens all the time. And that's a terrible thing to say, but it's true.
Yeah.
So I just had those three things to give you. So
I wonder if you could tell me what your day is like here. I want to get some idea of the.
You mean here in Terminal Island?
Yeah.
As opposed to generally speaking? Because they're very different.
Well, tell me just what your life in prison is like.
Okay, well, let me do regular prison first, and then the whole, because it's very different. This whole thing since I've been here is really bizarre. Prison, on the whole, my view of it is the only word that I can ever use it as a single word is that it's a gray experience. It really is. Everything is bland, and from the viewpoint of sensory input of a good nature, it's not bland from the other type, unfortunately. But I think of prison as a very gray zone. I believe that basically the majority of the staff are mediocre. The majority of the inmates are people who have committed crimes and basically are proud about the crimes. And the intelligence level is very low. It's proven in every study that's ever been done. It's way below average. But the food is bland, the clothes are bland. Your ability to do anything unusual or different at any time is almost non-existent. It's boring, and I think that that's really my overwhelming feeling of it. I want to shut. I'll set up our. So I was talking about
conditions in prison,
right.
And you said it was gray, boring. The people are dull,
right,
mediocre, unintelligent.
Well, but that's not true of everyone, of course.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, the average is significantly below standard, um, and I'm sure it's a standard deviation below standard. Um, so you're in a situation in which there is a lot of tension and a lot of violence, and sometimes of momentous proportions instantaneously, like 10 seconds separate, or a couple seconds separate an absolutely humdrum day with this totally drab existence to real violence with racial overtones, or other types of problems of drug sale that went wrong, and it's fairly common. So there's this um, contradistinction between those two things. On the one hand, you're supposed to and you are lethargic, and all your emotions are suppressed, and I'm sure your hormones aren't working in normal flow. I'm sure your pituitary is shut off a little bit. And on the other hand, there's this need to be constantly alert because of physical danger and constant threat of violence. So it's a strange environment. But in addition to that, it's governed by real rigid rules run by people who are not real professional. I mean, to be honest, even they admit it. I'm not saying something they don't admit. The staff is underpaid. They say they're overworked. The federal system doesn't seem overworked to me. In fact, it's the opposite. They're loaded with people. They just don't do much. Um, but you're in a situation where no one's happy. No one really wants to be there. The staff who work there complain about being there, and the inmates certainly don't want to be there. And a large percentage of them have a high propensity to quit violence. So it's a very bad combination of things. Then you add to that overcrowding, and then all you need is something like a missed phone call or a bad meal, and there's real trouble on the compound. So the days are the same, and there's that grayness, that sameness to it, um, involving everything I just said. It's always that same kind of conglomeration of boredom and lethargy and irritation, and yet instant violence over someone switching a TV channel without asking the other guys in the room, or someone taking too many minutes on the phone. Where you like at Bastrop, I mean at Phoenix, we're entitled to 15 minutes, and if someone goes over, they now have a guard there who directs it, so that on the 12 phones, that's his full-time job. At 15 minutes, he says, "Okay, time's up," because if not, there's going to be a brawl over the phone call. I mean, I'm talking about a minute in the phone call. Someone says, "You're in my time," and if you're a man, in quotes, in prison, you stick up for your rights. If you don't stick up for your rights, you're going to have real trouble real soon. You're going to be abused. So there's this tremendous disparity between a normal society on the one hand and a prison society on the other. And to try to weave your way through that safely is a very tough thing.
Yeah.
So my days are spent in normal prison populations, doing what I think a significant percentage of people do who get through prison safely. It's not the majority of people, but I'm not the only one who does what I'm going to tell you. And that is that you develop a way of carrying yourself and a lifestyle, so it doesn't involve many people on the compound, because the more people you're involved with, the more trouble. Over racial things, or over gang things, or over gambling debts, or over um, any kind of allegiance where you're expected to back your partner. So generally speaking, it's a couple people get together and feel fairly comfortable and don't talk about their cases to each other. And those people will run together and eat together and watch a movie together if they happen to have a theater. Phoenix doesn't have a theater. They have a little TV rooms about this size. They just run closed circuit TV. You do your job, which we'll talk about in a minute. Everyone in federal prison has a job. In state prison, that isn't true, so there's a lot more trouble because there's less focus time. And then you spend your spare time doing one of several things. I spend mine in a very routine fashion on the same things, which I think are important. That is my medical studies, my case, and keeping up interaction with my normal friends.
Yeah.
In other words, my family, my friends, the defense team because of the case involvement, and my medical studies. And that's what I do. And I do that 7 days a week, unless you have a visit. And that's the only way I can get through it easily. Other people do it other ways. They immerse themselves totally in the prison population. They get into prison groups, and they write petitions, and they worry about prisoners' rights, and they help all the guys file lawsuits, and they worry about clubs, and other people spend most of their time in a job that's somehow to them productive. For instance, there are guys who come in the prison system who have never been a clerk typist but can type. And they've always been in a different type of environment. But now that they're given a chance to do an office job, they actually find reasonable satisfaction in that. That's great because they can spend their day being a clerk in one of the offices for the staff, and they can type, and they're learning new skills, and they're interacting with people on a reasonably normal basis. Okay. I don't do that on purpose because I need the time to work on my case and to try to study as much medicine and stay as current as possible. So instead of trying to do that in 1 or 2 hours in the evening, I try to spend a lot of my time that way. So I always look for a job that doesn't require much time input. So my job
There is a range that you can have jobs that aren't full-time. You have the
yes,
choice.
there aren't many jobs that aren't full time, but there are always in every prison there are some jobs that are not full time. Certain of the food worker jobs are early morning, then you have the rest of the time off. Certain of the recreation jobs, you're in the recreation yard, and since one of the main ways to spend time in prison is getting your exercise, if your job is already on the recreation yard, that takes care of two things, your job and your exercise.
Yeah.
So then you use your evenings for all your other things, okay, as opposed to then having to use your evening to go out and work out, to run or to lift weights or to, however you want to get exercise and maintain some sanity. So, but I don't do that. I look for a way to stay near uh, the room so I have a writing space and I'm able to read and write during the daytime hours. So usually I end up with an orderly job or a part-time clerk's job or something. I've worked on the rec yards, I've worked as clerks, and I've worked as orderlies. The only other real alternative is to be a full-time clerk or to work in what's called industry. Each of the federal prisons has a industry where there's a job that you get slightly better pay at than the other people get. The other people get around 11 cents an hour, all the way up to 20 cents an hour. And the prison industry can go as high as, I think, 77 cents an hour, something like that. That is significant in prison because there are people with zero resources. I mean, no resources, no person, no phone calls, nothing. And in order just to get money for snacks or to buy a pair of sneakers once a year, you have to have some way to have money. And that industry job at 77 cents an hour after you've been in the job 2 years, it starts out, I think, at 33 cents an hour. They work 40 hours a week at that. So at the end of the month, they have almost $100. And that's how they get by financially. So it's very important, although it's very menial.
Yeah.
And those jobs are usually very rote. For instance, the one at Phoenix involves coupling. It's electric couplings, and you're splicing together two things all day long. That's your job. And you're not allowed to bring anything to read. And, you get your 2 little coffee breaks, and then the rest of the time you're sitting at the desk doing that.
It's a factory job.
It's a factory job, exactly. Exactly. Except you're not getting $6.80 an hour, you're getting 33 cents. So, but, like I say, in prison, if you need that money, that's important. About 25% of the population, that's my guesstimate. They may tell you something slightly different, but I think it's pretty correct. 25 to 30% of the population works in industry. The limit, by the way, is usually the number of jobs they have, not the people applying. There are more people applying for those jobs than get them because they need the money. So my day is spent in normal, quote, normal, end quote, prison environment is they always wake you up at 6 o'clock and you go to breakfast. So they unlock the unit. They unlock the door to your cell at 6, and then like 6:15 or 6:30, depending on that prison, you go to chow. By 7 o'clock, you're back at your cell.
What do you eat?
Well, they have eggs twice a week. The other mornings are either pancakes, French toast, or corned beef hash. Oh, I'm sorry. And the fourth thing, SOS. It came from what used to be chipped beef on toast. Now it's basically leftover hamburger in a white gravy that they put on, usually on potatoes. It's a white gravy with bits of meat in it on potatoes.
So how does that food rank in relation to dorm food in college, say? How much?
It's probably equivalent. On a bad day, it's worse, but on a good day, it's as good. There are meals that are just like the hospital cafeteria. For instance, the Mexican meals they serve are far and away the best meals. And you get a decent meal. You get a salad, you get a plate with beans and sometimes chili, and a couple of tortillas, and usually something else. Like there may be a couple of enchiladas. These are packaged things that the prison buys. So you'll get a decent meal.
Are you talking about here now or the regular prison?
Regular prison, but here also. The food's the same.
Yeah.
Food's the same. The quality of the food at each prison depends totally on the food administrator at that prison. It's an amazing thing, the federal system. Now, they have what looks like more control than that. They have a national menu, for instance. And when you go to them as a journalist and say, look, I heard there's some trouble with the food at Leavenworth, they say, oh, no, no, no. And they take out the national menu and they show you what the national menu has. And then you call the warden at Leavenworth and he says, we stick to the national menu. But if you talk to the inmates who eat the food, on Wednesday, they didn't get the jelly for the toast. They got one piece of toast instead of unlimited. They had 2 pancakes and they didn't have syrup that day, so they heated up some honey. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying this is what you had. And, so on and on and on. So if you took a yellow marking pen and went down the menu, about a third of the items never come out the way it's on the menu.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't bother me, quite honestly. I refuse to bother myself over these kind of things. I will not do it. And it's one of the ways I think that I can keep myself sane in prison. I don't worry about this day-to-day stuff. If I need be, I meditate to get over a bad day like that, or I bitch with a friend, as everyone else does, but I don't file complaints. Generally speaking, I don't write what's called a cop-out, COP-OUT. I don't know why it's called that, but in prison, a complaint form, it's actually called a inmate request to a staff member. That's what the formal title is on it, but no one calls it that. Everyone calls it a cop-out. When you write a cop-out, it's your statement to a staff member that something is wrong. Good administrators in prison respond to them. And I've seen many responses, hundreds of them, and the situation then changes. But as with any bureaucracy, there's a large number of people who could care less, especially what the inmates think. And so a lot of the cop-outs lead to nothing, or aggravation on the part of the inmate, or harassment by a staff member for filing. I don't get involved in any of that because I will make do, and I have enough resources so that I have commissary. So if the meal is terrible, I have a soup. They always sell packaged soups for that reason. They don't say it's for that reason, but every prison sells packaged soup. And when there's an awful meal, the guys who have funds available usually have a couple soups in their cell, and they go heat up a thing of soup, a cup of soup.
I don't understand how you do that. You have like those dried soups, yeah? You just keep that in your...
They're in those styrofoam containers. They're packaged. They're sealed. You buy them. They're like 65 cents each. And you take the cellophane off and open it up and put the hot water in, boiling hot water, and 3 minutes later you have a cup of soup.
Where do you get the hot water?
They have, each dorm has some mechanism. Some of them have hot water heaters. Some of them have it piped in from a central facility, but all prisons have that. And if they don't, the prisoners make what's called a stinger. And that's a fork that they attach. They solder in one of the workshops. They'll solder on a little piece of wire with a plug. And they plug it in the wall, and they stick that fork with the 2 tines into the fluid, and it heats it up. It's called a stinger, because you'll get electrocuted if you.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they do. They're illegal, but everyone has them to heat up their water when you can't get hot water.
I see.
Okay, so they make 2. In fact, there are a lot of very ingenious things that go on in prison. A lot of cooking that goes on behind closed doors. They use irons, and they'll turn the iron upside down and take an ashtray, a metal ashtray, and they scour them out. And then they steal everything from the kitchen. And so they have the iron is the source of heat. And they put the metal ashtray on it, and they'll cook. They'll cook steaks, hamburgers, everything. And they'll make meals. But that's not routine. In places that are tightly controlled, that is rare, but it happens. Okay, like in a prison with 1,000 people, it happens every day somewhere. And on some days, it happens in 5 or 6 areas that you can smell very easily as you walk around the prison.
You mean somebody was smuggling the raw meat, and then they were...
Well, they get it from the kitchen. They'll get it from the prison kitchen. The inmates are the cooks in the kitchen anyway. So someone somehow makes a deal for meat and onions and eggs and meat, I mean, and cheese and bread, and he makes himself hamburgers
Mhm. Just for the sport of it, huh?
for the sport of it. And that's it. It's actually it tastes a lot better than anything else you could possibly get because of the sport. That's exactly correct. I've had some wonderful steaks in prison, and I've only been served one or two in 7 years on the chow line that were worth eating.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's the truth of the matter. So that's the breakfast. They have cereal. They used to have when I started 7 years ago in this awful system. Every day, every breakfast had cereal, unlimited toast, jelly, honey, and peanut butter. So if you didn't like SOS, you know what SOS is, right? It's that cream with the beef in it.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Yeah.
SOS is an expression. It means
Yeah.
shit on a shingle.
I thought it was same old shit.
The same old shit, right? But
Yeah.
shit on the shingle. And everyone calls it. I mean, the staff, the people who run the kitchen call it SOS. What do you have? We have SOS today. That's what it is. Okay, so I'm not. That's a secret type of thing. It's
Yeah.
just standard conversation. Um, so if you didn't like SOS and or you weren't an egg eater or you didn't want the French toast or pancakes, which are the four breakfasts they have, um, you could always have cereal, or you could always have a peanut butter sandwich. And everyone was generally happy with the food.
Coffee or
Coffee,
yeah.
and they say there's usually juice, but that's changed also. Now it's usually not juice. Now it's um, colored fluid, and
Kool-Aid.
Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
That's normally what it is now. That's all changed over the 7 years. In other words, in 80 and 81 and 82, the breakfasts were much better than they are now. The funding has changed considerably over the Reagan years, drastically, dramatically, and the food is plummeted. I mean, it's much worse now. Now you get the cereal maybe 3 times a week, never get peanut butter. The jelly is once or twice a week. These are big things to inmates. I'm not saying this is a big thing to me, but this is a big thing in prison. And it creates a lot of trouble. Like a guy who's done time in a state prison in California, like Folsom or Quentin, and he's used to doing hard time. He doesn't bother anyone. No one bothers him. But if you get in his face, you're going to get stabbed real quick. And he's now in the federal prison. And his first couple of days, he tells the guy behind the counter, "Hey, I want some jelly." And the guy says, "We ain't got some jelly. We may get stabbed over that." Okay? Because I mean, in Quentin, when he said he wanted some jelly, you said how much, and you gave him jelly. You know, but now in the federal system, that's all history. Now and everything's tightly controlled, and the red line people are, the people that think that they're running some sort of a business are in. You know, it's a warehousing business now, and they walk around in suits with pads, and they count stuff like jelly and peanut butter and stuff, and they say, well, they don't need that pen, and don't give it to them. The budget says we can't have it, so it's very, very different. There's a lot of trouble over there. But we're asking about breakfast, and
I was thinking that for I guess the majority of the people, they probably are getting better food than for the really poor people, right?
for the very poor people, it's true. For instance, for illegal aliens, a lot of times they're amazed at what they're eating. They say that to you. I'm not putting words in their mouth.
Yeah.
They have said that to me. I think for some of the people that come from really deprived environments and inner city ghettos, it's, I'll be criticized for saying this. In other words, if this comes out in your article and it says that, there will be guys who will be very hot about me saying that, but it's true. The truth is there are people who are eating fairly rounded meals for the first time,
Yeah.
steadily 3 times a day. Okay. Um, the diet leans heavily towards fat and sugar. It's not a good diet for a really health conscious person, but it's an American diet. It's a real American fair diet.
There's not fruit. There's
Oh
not.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you pick and choose carefully, especially if you can hoard a little bit, okay? If you're good at hoarding a little bit, taking something from a meal and keeping it like an extra apple or something, you actually eat a very balanced meal. And with the commissary that we have available, you can do it if you have any funds without any question, because you can buy fruit.
Yeah.
And you can buy the soups. Okay. You can eat decently. I'm not saying to you, please understand that. It is not an awful, we're not being served slop in the federal system. That is not what happens. Now we get meals that are slop. Okay. And there are occasionally scenes like in here where half the guys throw the meal out on the floor. Okay. But generally speaking, the meals are just like a college dorm where the cook isn't a gourmet cook. It's just someone who slops out the food. You get some good stews and some bad macaroni, and you get a chicken dinner might be a good dinner one time, and the next time the chicken isn't really cooked and the gravy is terrible. It's like I've been in hospital cafeterias that are no better.
Yeah.
Absolutely no better. And no one really complains. The doctors are going through the line eating the food. So I'm telling you, trying to be real honest with you. So breakfast in the prison system's over by 7. Then everyone goes to work. Generally speaking, there are shifts in some places. Okay, some people work a PM shift, and some work even a night shift, believe it or not. But the 90% of the people then have to go to work, and they ring a bell at 7:30. All work call, and everyone goes to work. In my specific instance, my most recent job has been a dormitory orderly by my choice. I requested it. It's a job that people try to get for all the advantages that I've already alluded to. You have more time to yourself to do your own things if you're worried about your case or something you do. Like some guys go to school in prison and they want that time to work on papers. I mean, there are guys who have gotten college degrees who have never really been students until they got to prison. I'm not in that situation, but I'm working on my case or studying medicine all the time. So I try to use my time usefully that way. So I go do my job for a couple hours. And then from, say, 11 or 12 or 1 or 2, depending on the day and whether they're inspecting that day, et cetera, I then have the rest of the day basically to myself.
So during your work period, what work do you do?
Well, I am a dorm orderly, so I vacuum and I scrub the shower stalls and clean the TV room, wax the floors. There's usually 4 of us. Most dorms and prisons are roughly similar. There's usually 2 or 4 orderlies, depending on the size, and you split up the work. And you do it as quickly as you can and do a decent job, so it's clean to the other guys.
So all the cleaning then is done by you and
Right,
people.
exactly.
Yeah.
My basic job right now in Phoenix is a shower orderly. My job solely is scrubbing with abrasive scouring powder shower stalls. So I do that every morning for a couple hours, then I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
So I put up with what was a very menial type of thing. I don't even pay attention to stuff like that. That isn't demeaning to me as a person.
Yeah.
Work isn't bad.
Yeah.
So I just go do my 2 or 3 hours of hard work on inspection day. It's 7 hours of hard work. But the rest of the time I can fight for vindication or write letters or study medicine, and take courses, for instance, medical courses, continuing education type things. And I do that, and I work hard on that. So I don't.
You structure your day. You have certain
Right.
time when you do this and then that. Yeah.
Right. In other words, after I finish work, if I'm done by 11 or so, I spend a couple hours doing what was most important book-wise. Whether it be a course that's due in medicine or something on the case is usually what it is, quite honestly. It's usually your law. It's finishing one of these, okay? Or it's getting something for Gary on the civil suit, or it's making sure that somehow Ray Shedlick is aware of that new witness in Alabama, something like that. But 2 or 3 days a week, I use that as very quality time for 2 or 3 hours of real clear medical studying, so I'm up to date on everything.
So what do you read?
I read journals, textbooks,
and subscriptions that come in here? Yeah.
Right. Like those clippings I just gave you come from JAMA, and the book review is from JAMA, I believe, and the other stuff is from Annals of Emergency Medicine. I get 4 or 5 medical journals, plus I have textbooks. I always have a couple textbooks, and I rotate them, because you're not allowed to keep more than 15 books. So if I burn out a book and I've gotten what I need out of it, I will then send it out.
In your cell. You're just not allowed to. What is that wrote about?
Well, they claim it's a fire thing. And so you can't hide contraband in an unlimited number of books. So you can't secrete dope in hardcover book covers. And
I mean, they keep looking through the book.
Right.
15 is about the limit of what they expect.
It used to be 10. Last year, they finally enlarged it over in Phoenix to 15. That's a function of the warden. Okay? Little things like that are mainly functions of the warden at each prison. That's not a prison-wide system, but they're fairly routine in the federal system. In Phoenix, it was 10 books, and that wasn't nearly enough. And 15 is not nearly enough, but that's what it is now. The guys who are in the studying, for instance, the guys who are taking college courses, usually will get a note from someone saying that these 10 books have to do with courses, so they don't count towards the 15.
Mm-hmm.
And the counselors, like Mr. Scott that you just saw here, he is the kind of person who would say, No problem. And they give us a note. We keep it in a cell. So when they shake us down and say, you have 22 books, I say, yeah, but 7 are for a course.
Mm-hmm.
And they
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, show me. And I show them Mr. Scott's letter, and they'll say, okay, can't get you, can't give you a write-up because I'm okay.
So how do you get Gail's and you people?
Yeah, friends, relatives. It's one of the ways some people really feel they're helping, and they are helping. In other words, friends of mine will say, what can I do? I can't do anything to help you. And I'll say, as long as you keep asking, I'm gonna give you an answer. And I say, please do. And I say, look, I need this book. And they'll say, great. And they'll go down and get me a book, and it's great. And it's like a gift to me. And so then I really keep learning, and I feel good about life in general. And they've done something good, and we haven't eaten at defense funds. Because like the subscriptions, for instance, my friends pay for basically my subscriptions. I have at least 20 magazines.
And they don't count as books. That's,
No,
Mm-hmm.
you can only have a certain number of magazines too.
So what do you subscribe to?
I subscribe to 4 or 5 at least medical, like New England Journal of Medicine, Annals of Emergency Medicine, Critical Care Quarterly, Emergency Updates, JAMA. JAMA is not really a subscription. A friend who writes for JAMA sends me 4 issues every month.
Mm-hmm.
Just gets them out of the room there and sends me in an envelope. I get probably 8 sport magazines. I get Sport, Inside Sports, Sports Illustrated, a book on the a letter that comes out weekly on the New York Giants football team. I get Sporting News, which is a weekly magazine on only on sports, and a couple others. I like sports.
Obviously.
I get I get everything. I mean, I get the Atlantic Monthly lapsed, but I'm getting it back on. I get California Magazine. I get I'm trying to think. I have so many. I mean,
Time and Newsweek.
I get Newsweek. I don't get Time. I got tired of it. It was so Republican. Geez, it drove me crazy. It really did.
Can you vote as a prisoner?
I don't know. I always thought no. And I read an article last week in Newsweek about this prisoner who's fighting for prisoners' rights to vote. Apparently, in some states you can. I was totally unaware of that. It's real important to me. I want to find out.
What is your political affiliation?
I don't have one. I never have. I never have signed up. I always thought wanted to be able to go for who I wanted to as a person as opposed to a party, and I've always stayed that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's probably better not to say anything anyway. Generally speaking, I guess I'm more liberal than conservative, but I'm surprisingly conservative on several things,
Mm-hmm.
So.
You want to say what they are?
I was very conservative in 69, 70 when I was a Green Beret. I mean, I really believed in the war. Not the war for war. I believed in the war because I unthinkingly thought that our leaders must be doing the right thing. I thought Henry Kissinger and Nixon had to be doing the right thing. I mean, weren't we fighting communism? Wasn't the domino theory real? And I really worried about stuff like that. I thought these people that are marching against it are crazy. I said, now, it turns out that there's some truth to both sides. Although Jane Fonda will never admit it. I mean, there were 3 million people killed in Cambodia. Okay. And she didn't say anything about that. Joan Baez, at least, had the nerve to come back and say, maybe we made somewhat of a mistake. I mean, it was as bad as the Holocaust, but no one cares about it because they're Asians. Okay. So there was some reality to Cambodia and Laos falling. Now, the others haven't followed, so the domino theory is passé now. But I worried about those kind of things, and I thought that we should support our leaders, right or wrong. But basically, I thought they were right.
Yeah.
Colonel Kingston and I talked about it, my colonel at the time, and he was going to take me to Vietnam as a battalion surgeon. Basically, that's where we were, by the way, right when the tragedy occurred. He was already in Vietnam, and he had said, get 6 more months under your belt, and I will call for you. He said, I got enough weight in the system. You will end up as my battalion surgeon. Okay, I basically had that as sort of a promise from him. Okay, and all the other stuff occurred, and the tragedy occurred, and everything else. But I was my father had very strong views, and I would guess they were basically Republican, but I think he would deny vehemently he was truly a Republican. He would never say that he was anything. He just took points on issues. Um, I have never really affiliated. I would guess nowadays I'm much more Democratic than Republican, but it's really more an issue thing with me than it is a
Mhm.
party.
Mhm.
I mean, you look at some of the foolishness on both sides and you're just aghast. I mean, how the Democrats couldn't have made this a banner year.
Yeah.
I mean, no party has ever been handed the chance on a bigger silver platter than they've been handed it this year, and they haven't capitalized yet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's really disheartening, actually, um, because I think generally they have the people who are a little more thinking and feeling about other human beings as opposed to systems and businesses and weapons systems and bureaucracies, which I think is really the Republican forte, you know? And I didn't understand all that back then. I think I understand more now. And I don't mean to sound egotistical, but I really think I know more. And I feel much more Democratic in nature than I do Republican in nature at this point. But I certainly wouldn't sign up with the Democratic Party at present.
Mhm.
It sort of
Mhm.
seems to have its own uh, uh, death wish.
What has caused that switch to, let's call it, to the left? Do you think it's the prison experience and
Oh no,
no?
that was occurring way before then.
Mhm.
Not the prison experience at all. As a matter of fact, no, that isn't it. Clearly, I was in the midst of this all through the 70s.
Mhm.
I think it was a matter of really looking around and beginning to learn more about life than schooling, than really focusing on my science studies and working on it. I was always working so hard and going to school, I wasn't paying that much attention, and I was taking the glittering generalities off the top. I think I was in the mainstream at the time. Gradually, the mainstream has switched, and I may be a year behind. Gradually followed the mainstream, and now I understand that the Vietnam thing really had some very bad sides to it, you know. So it wasn't prison at all.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
uh, on a social basis, I've always been much more Democratic than Republican. I mean, I've always been, you know, generally empathetic and I think more understanding, and I would always be a giving person about the aged and mental health and blacks and Jews and women or whatever. You know what I'm saying? I always worried about stuff like that. My father always fought about that. My mother always talked about stuff like that, and I just grew up always assuming that those minorities had the rights of everyone else, and it was wrong to do otherwise. So I wasn't really a Republican. All I'm saying is my superficial view of the world then was that
Yeah.
generally, God, the armed forces were correct, the FBI was correct, J. Edgar Hoover had to be a decent guy. Turns out he's sort of a maniac, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
at the time, I believed Elliot Stack, you know. So um, I would never be a radical either way. I don't think that's not in me. It's not in my personality at all. I don't think I'm a marcher,
Yeah.
you know. I always feel as though that I was always trying to rebuild my life. I never got into other causes. I'm not saying I was a cause to myself. I'm just saying that all through the 70s, there was always something major happening, and I never really got off on tangents other than emergency medicine, fighting the case and trying to rebuild my life several times.
Because this has really been the dominant
Right.
fact in
Yeah,
your
18 years now.
adult life. How
26
old
to
were you? You
44.
were 26. It's incredible.
26 to 44. Boy, it's just unbelievable. It really is unbelievable. It's weird. Someday I will be vindicated. Now that doesn't make any of this right. This is all awful. It's just terrible. But that's not answering the question. I don't know.
You still feel hopeful, no?
Oh yeah, I have to. I mean,
Because I mean, everybody that I've talked to has sounded um, discouraged about all those appeals that have been turned down and by the Supreme Court.
we are.
So,
They were devastating. Mm. The excuse me. Over all the years and all of those motions and all that, we won in 76, we lost in 78, we had trial in 79, all that. Um, there are two losses that are clearly catastrophic. One was when, actually there were three. when the Supreme Court decided to hear for the second time the government's argument on speedy trial. I had been to prison, got out on a Fourth Circuit win. That was the second time the Fourth Circuit moved for me. The day that the government got from the Supreme Court the yes as to they will rehear the case, I mean, it was like, it was such an omen. They shouldn't have reheard the case legally. If you look at it and you brought it to 100 legal scholars, I'll bet you at least 80 of them say, this is incredible.
Sure.
You know, why they heard this case was so weird. So we knew from that moment on that it was ominous. That was the first one that was really a bad loss. The second one was after I lost that next decision. The Supreme Court overturned. They brought me back to prison. When the Fourth Circuit, not Judge Dupree, because we never expected anything from Judge Dupree, but 6 months later, when the Fourth Circuit agreed that there was no major trial error, that was like a death knell. And then the third one was to turn down the motions for new evidence based on the 37 new witnesses and the 7 items of suppressed evidence and Jimmy Proctor and Dr. Brussel. Those 4 motions that were argued in 85. Again, not Dupree's turn down, although that information is so clear that his turn down was hard to take, even him. But when the Fourth Circuit said that it was okay for Dupree to have turned it down, which is really what they said, that took a long time just to get up on our feet again. I mean, that was unbelievable that they said that. I mean, you can go to the law books any day of the week and leaf through cases having to do with the criminal justice system as opposed to civil and the corporate law and all that other stuff. And it is impossible to figure out how they could do that based on the evidence that was presented. The 4 new motions to force a new trial. When you see what creates a new trial in most cases, you know, the one officer forgetting to add 1 sentence to the Miranda warnings, or someone illegally opened the trunk of a clearly guilty suspect's car, or a witness in prison who, in a affidavit that he clearly has no risk from and may have some benefit from himself, is now changing his story about another person in prison, and that other person in prison gets a new trial based on it. And you see these cases after cases after cases, and you can throw out how anyone feels about me or how I am as a person, or even some of the evidence. But if you take the body of evidence, the least that has to happen is a jury has to hear it. That's the least that has to happen. Forget me as a human being, or the quality of the evidence, or the quality of the people who uncovered that evidence. Okay? The minimum that has to happen is a jury has to hear it. The law is clear on all those things, and the Fourth Circuit said Judge Dupree's rulings were fine. So those are devastating blows, and each one of those took progressively longer to get back up on our feet. It wasn't really until after the civil trial, and actually 2 to 3 months after the civil trial, September, beginning October or something like we really began to get our energy back up enough to start to go after other stuff in the case again. And now that's what we've been doing for 3 or 4 months. I mean,
You've been very unlucky in all these.
oh, terribly so. Terribly so. Some of it's not luck. Some of it's pretty much by design. I mean, when you look at Joe McGinnis and Brian Merton, that's not luck. You know, how can you call what Joe McGinnis did to me intentionally 4 years of luck? It isn't luck.
No, that isn't. But before his book came out, you were already. I mean, you can say drawing Judge Dupree was
Yes.
the first piece of
Yes.
that, right? Just
Yes. If you assume that the drawing of Judge Dupree was a chance event, and there's considerable doubt that that's in fact what occurred. In other words, there were only 3 judges in the district, and I got the judge whose son-in-law worked on the case. Now, they didn't tell us that, which is the worst part of it.
Yeah.
Had they come to us in 75 when Dupree started working on the case and said, oh, by the way, my son-in-law was the assistant U.S. attorney back in 70, and we never really discussed the case, although we both admit it was the most important case we either had, we probably would have objected and said, well, we'd rather go to one of the other two. He didn't do that. They hit it. Fourth Circuit said that was okay. That's unheard of.
So who were on the Fourth Circuit?
Well, there were different panels on different hearings. The main one that we're disappointed in is Judge Murnahan, because he's the one who made the fairly strong rulings based on the Helena Stokely material. And I'm not saying he was pro-me. He certainly wasn't pro-me, if you read his opinions carefully. But he was trying to follow the law. And the law said that those witnesses, the 7 that Dupree didn't let the jury hear, should have been heard by the jury. Okay? And he said, had he been the judge, he would have done it differently, but he couldn't say that Judge Dupree abused his discretion to do what he did. And that's how he eventually got around it. So he ruled for me in 80, one of the 2 votes in my 2-to-1 decision that got me out of prison when I went home again, I had those 18 months. But when it came around the next time based on real trial error, in which there's no question there's trial error. I mean, if you could somehow polygraph Brian Murtaugh, actually all you have to do is read his press releases. It's clear. They knew another trial was coming. They knew that from the day I was locked up in August of 79. There was no way those errors could ever pass judicial review. They were so outrageous, and it was so one-sided that no matter what you think of Jeff MacDonald, this case was going to be heard again. Brian Murtaugh has said, and Blackburn has said in the press, well, we're getting ready for trial. And the decision comes down from Dupree, no, and then the Fourth Circuit says no. And you think, oh, there's something seriously wrong here. I mean, seriously wrong in the system. You know, it just, how can that be? How can they not even review the evidence?
Yeah, yeah. So that's where one wonders, if you have a theory of conspiracy, what?
I have a feeling of serious judicial laziness and just simply defending brother judge. I almost think that we made a mistake. I almost feel we made a mistake in filing the motion to get Judge Dupree recused off the case based on Jimmy Proctor, his son-in-law. I have wondered since the turn down if we hadn't attacked one of them, if we had left it to the other 3 motions, the Russell phony interview, the 7 items of suppressed evidence, and the 37 new witnesses, if we had left it to those 3 motions, would 2 of the 3 judges at the Fourth Circuit had the nerve to do what was right, which was to order a new trial. But once we attacked the federal judge, then we're calling into question the whole system. And there, pretty much, the old boy network still obtains. They basically close ranks.
Yeah.
It's almost unheard of to get a federal judge recused. Almost unheard of. State court is very different. You can't confuse the two. When you hear of Racehorse Haynes in Texas, for Melvin Belli in California, and you read about cases where the judge is taken off the case for this and that, those are state cases. Those are not federal cases. A whole different world. It's literally a universe apart. In the state system, any appearance of impropriety, they immediately kick the judge off. In the federal system, that's what the law says, but they almost never do it. Almost never. I mean, you can go to any lawyer and ask them. Any lawyer who knows what he's talking about in the federal system, ask them, and they'll tell you what I just said. You just can't get a federal judge off the case. They have that lifetime tenure. They have a power that's equaled by no one else in government. Federal judges. They have unbelievable power. They can change a school system. They can change the laws of an entire state. They can change the laws of an entire region, which means if it ever gets heard in any other region, they've now changed the laws in the country. One judge, one person.
But they can't be
Overruled by a 3-judge appellate court. Yeah. Exactly. And in my case, it wasn't done. I have been told by people more conversant with the law than me that had we had a hearing in New York, for instance, or California, different circuits, as opposed to the Fourth Circuit, it would have been overturned. But that's like a retrospectoscope. But they say that the outlook is quite different, that the smaller size in the Fourth Circuit, 13 judges at that time. I think now it's 16, but it used to be 12 or 13 judges. And the good old boy Southern Network is such that to say something like that about Judge Dupree is a major thing in their life, and they don't do it. They just don't do it. So we wonder, we have wondered in the past, by going after Judge Dupree, did we sign the ticket that says MacDonald stays in prison?
Yeah.
You know,
But it could also be they didn't want to rule against him on that. They wouldn't have on the other issues either. If they're so close, you know.
that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is by filing that motion implicating Judge Dupree, the easiest way to clear the books is to deny it.
Yeah. But they would have done it in any case, no? I mean, apart from the personal factor, if they wanted to uphold his decision no matter what.
Right.
Right.
Yes, that's right. But it's sort of, the question is it is it waving a red flag in front of a bull?
Yeah.
To try to basically charge one of their people with wrongdoing.
Yeah.
It's not quite, we weren't really doing that. We were saying there's an appearance of impropriety here, and the law says the appearance of impropriety, not impropriety. There's a big difference. But they don't even like the appearance of impropriety. Look at the trouble they have getting rid of the federal judge in Florida who has been convicted of a felony. And he's fighting to keep his judgeship. Hastings was Alcee Hastings or whatever the guy's name, the black judge.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's a major, serious problem.
Did you argue against doing that?
No, I did not argue against doing that. In fact, I wanted to take him on foursquare.
Yeah.
Foursquare. I thought, to me, the law is so clear on that. The law is clear. I'm not talking about using cases.
Yeah.
See, you win your case several ways in the law when we go into court. You can win based on a law, a statute that's written down, or you have a more difficult argument of prior cases. The law on recusal is so crystal clear. Never mind the cases. Okay, there is no question that he should have been recused, and I should be granted a new trial solely. I thought that's how we'd win.
But I think your hindsight is probably accurate, because it would have been a criticism of him.
Right.
He's the one who was supposed to have been in the first place.
Right. And then, we found out later that, and I wish we had used it now, but it would have been more of the same. And that is, we even found out that there was a much closer connection between Judge Dupree and Jimmy Proctor than they admitted in their affidavits. Basically, they lied in their affidavits. Jimmy Proctor did.
Yeah.
That there was basically no contact. And in fact, Ray Shelley saw him collecting his mail in the same, at Judge Dupree's office.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Brian O'Neill felt that was definitely waving a red flag in front of a bull. And the law was so clear, we didn't need it. So why do that? Why enrage the bull? Just say, look, there's an appearance of impropriety here. Let's do what's right. Give him another trial. And they said, no, it's okay what they did. So it was a stunning loss. It's been major, major blows.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of these have really been tough to come back from. And like I say, it's only been recently in the last couple of months that we finally feel like we're able psychologically to get the strength and the oomph back together to start going after some leads that still have some promise. It's very tough to figure out how to get back into court now. See, everyone can know I'm innocent, including the prosecutor. It doesn't get me out the door. We still have to have a mechanism, a way to go in and have a federal judge say, I agree, open the door. And that's the problem.
So which federal judge would it be?
Judge Dupree.
Why is he going to now? I mean, he must be very interested in appearing right, huh?
Of course. He's had a vested interest since his son-in-law talked to him. And if he didn't, he certainly had it since he began abusing Bernie in 1975. And if not, he certainly had it after trial. And then if not then, after we accuse him of wrongdoing.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's no question what Judge Dupree's going to do. Judge Dupree lied in his written opinion. I mean, lied. I'm not talking about made this editorial decision that we've talked about as far as writing. He lied. He changed witnesses' testimony in his opinion. The Fourth Circuit then quotes him. I mean, a little thing like, not a little thing, a big, like the wounds. He has changed ice pick wounds documented by physicians with drawings.
Is that the COVID?
Yeah, but that's not, I can't answer that. That's the staff.
Yeah.
Someone's dialing the wrong number. He has changed that to fingernail scratches. That isn't in McGinnis's book. And we don't know who's reading who. But McGinnis's book has it, and Judge Dupree has it in 1985. And strangely enough, Judge Dupree also has a footnote saying he's never read the book or watched the movie. And we didn't ask him if he read the book or watched the movie, but he put it in his opinion. And yet he has a finding in there that is from Fatal Vision.
Mm.
I mean, he wrote in there that the wounds were fingernail scratches. Jesus. I mean, I read that. I can't remember where I was, Bastrop or Phoenix. I don't remember. I guess had to be Bastrop. And I called Brian. I'm yelling at Brian, this is crazy. I said, you have got to absolutely castrate this guy at the Fourth Circuit. He said, we can't argue facts. He said he is the trier of fact. And we can't argue the facts because all they are looking at is, did he abuse his discretion by not trying to view the facts squarely or not? If he tried to view them squarely, then his opinions stand. If he abused his discretion and said, for instance, I'm not going to look at any of that, then the Fourth Circuit can say he abused his discretion. But he didn't do that. He very carefully wrote 110 pages and says in it, he's agonized over this, or words to that effect. You know, I've really been mulling this over, and these 37 witnesses are a mirage of the defense team. The evidence doesn't exist. He said the bloody syringe does. He said it doesn't exist. It's written in a report by an FBI agent. He says it doesn't exist. Now, how can he do that? So what I'm saying is Judge Dupree went way out of his way to color the waters. And so when it got to the Fourth Circuit, he had made it easy for him. You know, they can easily uphold his decision based on he didn't abuse his discretion. They don't look at the evidence. People don't understand that.
Yeah.
They don't pick up the 37 witness statements and go through them. Okay? That's a myth that lay people have about the system.
I know. I mean, I feel in myself a reluctance to get into this because I feel, how can I, a layman who's not in any way versed in all this stuff about footprints and fingerprints and all this stuff, what can I know?
Well, you can look at the two versions.
Yeah.
You can see the weight of the people who are making the statements.
Well, I mostly, on this issue, have talked to people on your side, and everybody very convincing. And I have a feeling that the other side is going to, they obviously convinced 12 members of a jury.
Yeah, but things were very different then. We didn't know most of what we know now. That was still hidden, remember. Most of the things we talked to you about came out post-trial, because at trial, although we knew some prosecutorial misconduct had gone on, we had no idea of the depth of the deception. We had no idea about Jimmy Proctor, Dr. Brussels, the 7 items of suppressed evidence. And in that group of 37 witnesses, several of them had already gone to the prosecution. Now, understand what I'm saying. Whether or not those witnesses had been used at trial was the prosecution's decision. They don't have to use witnesses. But I had to have been told of them. That's the law. That is well settled. If a witness came forward to the prosecution and gives them information that tends to prove me innocent, I must be given the information. I was not given it.
Yeah.
We get it in 1983. Then when we file and say, okay, give us a new trial, Judge Dupree says it doesn't exist. I mean, that's you're like in an insane asylum. It's really incredible. You shout it from the rooftops and then you go to the mountaintops and no one's listening. It is an unbelievably frustrating. So then you have to back off and say, look, if you shout it any louder, you're going to look loony. So you have to pull back and do something that's very unnatural. And that is to be calm and rational through all this, which is a very uncalm and irrational thing that was done against you. But I am supposed to be the calm and rational one, or somehow I am what the prosecution claims I am. You see what I'm
I
saying?
see what you're
So
saying.
there's a
Yeah,
double and a triple
yeah,
bind that begins
yeah,
developing. So
yeah,
I have to sit back and
yeah,
very calmly go over this stuff and reinvigorate a new group of attorneys and investigators and get them, and they have to go over the prior two groups and still find new stuff. It has to be new each time. It can't be anything already discussed.
yeah. And there is always prejudice toward, I think Brian O'Neill mentioned this to me, just that when there is a decision made, there is this already this sort of weight on that side.
Exactly.
The idea that, you can't keep retrying every case.
Exactly. Not only that, there is a decision that's very unspoken in most areas, but it's clear throughout law, this is true, that if you have been convicted, if you ever win again, it's because of a technicality.
Yeah.
It
But
doesn't really
that would
matter
be good enough for you, wouldn't it, to get
right now. You're darn right. That is not what I was saying in 1979-80.
Yeah.
Okay. In other words, I think had I known, had the value, the view of the retrospectoscope, I would have been perfectly happy to push my attorneys into arguing more technical things as opposed to my innocence. But it was important to me, just like it was important to the Dick Cavett show. And why should I be saddled, as it were, with this horrible thing forever? It's not true. Someone said to me, I won't tell you. Well, I will tell you. It's one of my lawyers before they were in the case. Okay. And it was, I think, a test. But the lawyer said to me, if we got enough stuff to make this confusing, and if the prosecutor says to me, okay, time served for manslaughter, and it's all over, or we retry him on the same charges, I didn't hesitate, and I would never hesitate for a split second, never. I mean, the charges are not true. And what I'm saying is, I would not ever say that the 7 years were enough and okay, if you let me go home, I will plead guilty to manslaughter. Do you know what I'm saying? It's not true. And I'm not going to be proven guilty and spend the rest of my life. Even if it's after I'm dead, I don't care. It's going to eventually be proven, you know? So I'm going to keep fighting in answer to your question.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to give up, and I'm going to somehow find enough energy each time. And there's enough good people who continue to get outraged, and they say, "Okay, count me in." Some of them cost money, and some don't. So if I don't have money, I got to look for someone else. It doesn't make any difference. It's eventually going to happen. There is a weight to the truth, and I believe this in my absolute heart and core. There is definitely a weight to the truth, and somehow it's going to eventually come out. It cannot be hidden forever. We had 7 witnesses in 1979 that weren't heard by the jury. We had 22 more different ones in 1983. By 1985, it was 37 witnesses. Now it's over 40. This cannot go on forever. The government has won some unbelievable rounds. I mean, we can be conspiracists if we want. I can tell you there's some bad people on the other side, like Ivory and Murtaugh. But as far as conspiracies, I have no idea. I have no proof of that. I can tell you where they've lied, cheated, and hidden stuff and misrepresented. Okay. But I don't know the motivation other than normal human motivations of their own careers and greed and publicity. And now Murtaugh's a hero in the book. Okay. So I can't give you any more than that, but it's not going to last forever.
So what do you think Assad's motive
Was or is? Big difference.
Well, was in his abrupt change of he was supposed to be a big supporter, right?
Right.
And then
The change we're talking about now?
yeah,
The change occurred, I think. Kasab will have to give you his answer, but my answer is that Kasab.
I've spoken to him actually, and I tried to get this from him, and he was rather vague about it.
That's the whole problem. That is the whole problem.
I asked him what were those things in the 32 report,
Right.
that caused you to change your mind, because as McGinnis writes, if that's what it was, when he got that document
Right.
in his hands, then it changed for him.
Right.
And he said it was, oh, it's been 17 years, and he just can't go into that now. So he didn't answer. I mean, I would have thought he had some specific things that.
Well, I know what it used to say,
Mhm.
and I also know what I believe. What I believe is what he used to say is two things changed his mind. The Article 32 report, which he never tells you that I gave him. Okay.
McGinnis says that, though, in the book, no? I think that
Yeah, but in a very begrudging manner. In other words,
yeah, that you didn't want to give it
I
to him
didn't
for a
want to
long
give
time.
it to him and all this crap. The truth is, we never had an Article 32 report, and he knows it. I got the Article 32 report because I filed some paperwork, and Representative Otis Pike from Riverhead, New York, who was on the Armed Forces Committee, Riverhead's Long Island. That's my area at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Otis Pike forced the issue with John Stennis, I believe it was, the senator, and between the House and the Senate, they called the Justice Department and said, "You can't keep this man's report from him. It's him. Give him his own report."
Mm-hmm.
So we got the Article 32 report in like the last, I don't know, mid to last part of November of 70.
Why did you want it?
I don't know. I guess we always said we had to have it. I don't know. I mean, I guess
Because, yeah,
we wanted the proof in our. Well, wait a minute now. Of course, there are some obvious. When you asked me that, it sounded so clear. What?
because you can also imagine somebody so glad to be clear that they would just sort of walk.
Oh yeah, but I had just been a public spectacle for 5 months. This isn't. People. Boy, I'll tell you, it's amazing what 18 years does. This was not page 19. This was page 1 for the 4 months of the Article 32 in the Fayetteville area that I was living. I'm not talking about Long Island. I mean, I was there, and everyone on Fort Bragg and in Fayetteville and everyone around it, this was the topic.
Yeah.
Okay, this was a huge thing. Someone doesn't come through that without some feelings and some scars and some emotion attached to it. Okay, um, but you got to get back into the paranoia of the times. We had already found out about changed evidence, missing stuff. That when the hair report was being changed, my lawyers had been assaulted. I mean, all of that's misrepresented in the book, but that's very clear. I hope you talked to Bernie about it. I mean, they were clearly assaulted. It was witnessed by newsmen who photographed it. The front page of the Fayetteville Observer has had the eyewitness accounts from the newsmen paralleling the Army's explanation. It was like Mars and Venus. It was unbelievable. One said it never occurred, and actually what did occur was a publicity stunt, and the other said, we watched 5 cars run his car off the road, jerk him out of the car, throw one attorney to the ground, slam the other up against the car, okay, and they were taken away eventually to the hospital, okay? The Army says none of that happened, that the confrontation was engineered somehow somehow we arranged for 5 carloads of the prosecution team to attack us. That's what they said in print. Okay. Joan McGinnis puts that version in the book.
Yeah. Mhm.
We were making a point here. Forgot what it was.
I asked you why you wanted that report.
Oh, so I'm trying to get you back to the paranoia of the times. Now, I'm living for 5 months in a room, BOQ, Bachelor's Officers Quarters. Okay. There's an armed guard sitting outside my door. There's one pacing out the 2 big windows who was pacing all day there. There was one at either end of the hallway. Okay. And I have an escort officer come in to take me anywhere when I have, because I'm an officer. And the code was that an officer of equal rank will be with him at all times. And the answering code is, because I'm an officer and a gentleman and chivalrous, I wouldn't try to flee because it would destroy my fellow officer's career. That's the code in the service.
Mhm.
That's how it worked. So we went around, I went to have meals, and I would run, and I would go to the hearing every day with my escort officer. Okay. They move in over me, a major in military intelligence. Okay. Now, I mean, anyone can understand what they're doing. They were listening to the conversations in the room with listening devices, and the MPs in the hallway told us they were doing that. These were kids, 19-year-old MPs. They could care less about the Army. These are the 2-year wonders who didn't want to go to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And they were saying, hey, Captain, this guy upstairs, he's a real asshole. Just be careful what you say in the room. They got recording devices. We knew exactly what was going on. We would sprinkle talcum powder over my floor and go to lunch or go to the hearing. We would come back and there'd be footprints in the talcum powder. I mean, it sounds juvenile, but that's, and we'd go out and we'd say to the guard who was inside the room, and he'd get all red, 19-year-old kid from Brooklyn or something. He'd get crimson. He'd say, no one. I just work here. No one, you know? And so we'd go back and I'd make a note, and my escort officer would sign the note so that there was no, you know, quarreling later on when we had to prove they were breaking into my living quarters to read my attorney-client correspondence that they weren't entitled to see. Okay. And then we'd set traps in the drawers with hair. You take a hair, put it in a letter, and have someone witness it so you can all see where the hair is. And when you come back from lunch, there's no hair. Someone's taken a letter, read it, and the hair's gone, or it's in the letter or whatever. Okay. So all this had been going on, including intentional changing of lab reports. The whole end result of the hair incident, which Joe never says clearly, is that 6 weeks later, after assaulting my lawyers and after taking the hair, which, by the way, all we had ever said to them was, "You need a lawful order. Get his colonel to say, Captain MacDonald, you must give hair." And they said, "Fuck you. You can't tell us how to run the Army." The CID guys. This is not Army. This is CID. They're Army, but it's not the same thing.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's what happened over the hair incident. They take the hair. 6 weeks later, there's no lab reports. To make a long story short, Colonel Rock got so angry when he found out the hair report had been there a week later, and they had been hiding it for 5 weeks, that he called Mr. Grebner, the head of the CID, and put him on the stand himself. And he made him give him the hair report, and he put in the record things like, "Where has this hair report been?" And Mr. Grebner says it was lost in the evidence safe. So we have this, Bernie and I are sitting there, and Mike Malley and everyone is sitting there, and we're looking around the evidence. Like, we're picturing a walk-in locker, like this. So Colonel Rock or Bernie or someone says, "Well, how big is the evidence safe?" He says, 18 by 12 by 12. So we figure he must mean 12 by 12 on the doorway, 12 feet by 12 feet, and 18 feet deep. And so Bernie says something like a foot, 18 feet deep. And he says, "No, 18 inches. It's 12 inches by 12 inches and by 18 inches. That's the evidence locker in a triple homicide that's in the headlines every day." And Mr. Grevner has just testified he lost the hair report. So we interviewed the lab techs at Fort Gordon, and they testified under oath that they had gotten a call from the prosecutor to change the lab report, and it took them 5 weeks to hold them off. Now, they did issue a second one, but they refused to say what the prosecutor wanted. They tried to soften the wording. The end result was the hair in Colette's hand was not mine. Okay, this is why they assaulted the lawyers and took the hair, to prove that the hair in Colette's hand was mine. When it came out not to be mine, to be someone else's, then they lost the hair report and tried to get it to be changed. And they eventually got him to say that you have to have an infinite number of hair sources from Dr. MacDonald before we say it isn't his hair, which isn't true at all. I mean, the hair experts had already testified. You take proper number of hair samples from each area. You can tell whether it's pubic hair, limb hair, or head hair in the first place. And I had no hair, 3.5 inches long, blonde, which is what the hair was. Okay, so the whole thing was false from the beginning. Everyone knew that Captain MacDonald had no 3.5 inch long blonde hairs. So all of that, I didn't mean to spill off into that, but all of that, you have to understand the paranoia that we were working under. I mean, we were not imagining people behind the hedges. The people were behind the hedges. And there's a
Mhm.
big, big difference there. So at the end of this hearing, I would say to Bernie, "How do I know they can't come back to me?" He says, "Well, you can't really, except we have to get a copy of the report." So we have in our hands the written justification for Colonel Rock's thing. So we started fighting
I see.
so we got it. The initial impulse was that, but it did evolve into other things. There were talks of books, and we did show it to reporters. One reporter wouldn't do a story when the story first broke until he saw a copy of some documents. So we eventually got
Mhm.
3 pages of Rock's report even before I saw it. And when he saw the Xerox pages of the Rock report, he then did a very truthful story, which turned out 2 weeks later to be absolutely on target. This is exact word for word, as a matter of fact. Okay. He took a chance. At the time, he thought he was taking a chance because he was dealing with a Jew from Philadelphia and a captain who was charged with murder. But he took the chance after he saw the Xerox pages, did an article. And so this is the time frame we were in. So when Bernie said one of the ways that we have to be sure of the, like defending our flanks is to have the reports, they said no. Well, that was like a red flag. Then we went crazy, and very quickly, Otis Pike and I think it was Senator Stennis made calls for us. And within a week or two, now we're in mid-November to late November, I got it. Okay, the Article 32 hearing, they delivered one copy, and I had to sign forms, which I think we still have, showing that we were getting one copy only. So what they wanted to say, what they were telling us was, if this is ever leaked, because it's private Army material, the leak's on you, not us, because this is the only copy leaving the Army. So I got that copy, and I'm leaving Fort Bragg December 4th. So it's late November. So I put it in my car and I drive it up north, and it goes in my mom's apartment like 2 days later. Okay. And within 10 days, it was in Freddie's hand. Now, for years, we've been listening to this story as to how Jeff was obstructing
Yeah.
Freddie from getting the Article 32 report. That never
So he got it
occurred.
from you. He went over to your mother's house, or what happened?
Well, the book said, I don't know if this is true. The book says my mom delivered it. I don't know if that's true. That it may have happened that way. I thought I remembered bringing it over, but the book says that my mom delivered it right near Christmas. That may be true. I never even asked my mom, to tell you the truth. I could ask her if you want me to find out.
Well, no, I'm just trying to get the atmosphere of um what was
Well, see, I went right away to New Hope, Pennsylvania, found 2 jobs in New York, and I was basically commuting between New York City and Pennsylvania, occasionally coming out on the island to see my mom, occasionally coming out on the island to see um, Freddie and Mildred, but not frequently. Okay. It was already to the point where every dinner, Freddie would get sloshed and we would talk about how to kill the assailants. Okay. I mean, we had several dinners where you couldn't finish the meal. Mildred would be talking about gouging out eyes and stuff like that. And it got really crazy. And so I worked harder and harder and was available less and less. And that's really what happened. And in the spring, when I was offered the position out here, I didn't come out for that. I came out for a 1-week vacation, but Jerry Hughes eventually talked me into coming back. And when I made the decision mentally, the day I called Jerry Hughes from my little apartment in New York, there was this tremendous lifting it was like, I can breathe. I'm going to go and try to live a life rather than doing this and remembering Colette and Kim and Christy every day mixed up with the Kassabs, who are ghouls. They're not Colette, Kim, and Christy. This is very different than Colette. The picture that you have seen in the movie and even in the book is not really an accurate picture.
I haven't seen the movie yet.
Well, that's even more pro-Kassab. I mean, basically, there's Mildred baking, and we saw the Kassabs on Christmas, sometimes on Thanksgiving, and usually once during the summer. That's when we saw them. It was always friendly. There was always love shared. There was always gifts shared, but it was totally a formal, cool relationship. Colette was never comfortable with her mother. She's a totally different person than Mildred Kassab. Mildred was always a social climber in their town. Okay, then when her husband committed suicide and Freddie came on the scene, Colette was never close to Freddie. She never once the book is unbelievable. The book says that exactly the opposite of the truth, that Colette called him her father. Colette specifically said to all her friends and to me and to everyone who knew her that Freddie was a wonderful man and she was happy for her mom, but that was not her dad, and she would never call him dad. You know, you know, her dad was apparently a really neat guy, and over the years, my view of it was that he kept getting neater and neater, which is normal.
Sure.
There's nothing wrong with that. But I mean, now to take those facts and to turn it into Colette jumping on Freddie's lap and throwing her arms around him and calling him daddy is just sick. It has nothing to do with reality. The business about the scene in the movie, my mom and I were gagging over it. This business of Mildred cooking Mildred would say things like, you can bring one of the kids, but not two. Two are too many for my house. That's how she was. I'm not really criticizing her. That was her right to do that. What I am, that's how she was. She was a formal person. She had a very beautiful home. She was an interior decorator. She had very expensive, rich tastes, very different than mine, and actually very different than Colette's. Colette was a very different, Colette was an earth tone person. Mildred was brocades and rich tapestries and French and Victorian pieces of art and stuff that you had Chinese pieces. We never had any interest, nothing like that at all. Colette's lament was always that her mother could be starving, not have enough money literally for the groceries, and she'd buy an antique, and that's exactly what she did. She bought a silver antique inkwell 1 week when they were living in the now famed Washington Square apartment, where Colette and I had that little session on the couch that they always talk about. And within
What was the address?
um, everyone knew it as Washington Square Village. It's right at right past the Arc.
Oh, it's in that modern building.
It was those pastels. There were 4 buildings and they were all pastels at the time.
Okay, so it was in one of those.
Those
That
4.
that
As
the
a matter of fact,
complex.
if you're at the Arc, it's in the right rear. It was in the right rear building.
Because I got in the book. It says it's in Washington Square. I know Washington Square, so I wondered which.
Yeah, no, it was in those.
It wasn't Washington Square. Washington Square Village is something different from
Oh, is it?
Washington Square.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
but Washington Square is that square where there's a park and
right,
there are
and
all
it's
those
right.
NYU
It's
buildings.
the next thing over.
It's the next
those
thing over.
big, those 4 big buildings. They were pastels, and at the
Right.
time, that was new to New York. I mean, they were. Everyone talked about it because they were pastels.
Yeah, these modern apartment
Right.
houses. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
I know somebody who lives in one of them. Yeah, I've been in those
okay.
apartments.
So that the business about the inkwell, Colette was furious. As a matter of fact, it was probably that weekend, the Thanksgiving weekend, that the inkwell was there. And Colette was furious. She said, "Can you imagine? Mom can't send me $20 for a bus ticket from Skidmore to New York. I sent it. Me, working in a student council, a student union at Princeton." She said she can't send me $20 for a bus ticket, but she spent and I remember what it was. Well, I better not say that. It was expensive. I think she said $350. And we almost fell over because it was more than their rent.
Yeah, those days that would be a lot.
Right. It was
Yeah.
more than the rent. And when we got the wedding was fun. It was really nice. It was a nice wedding. It was put on by Mildred and Freddie. Okay. But we loaned them from the wedding gifts. It was more like an Italian. Everyone who came up gave us money. They knew our condition and they knew that I was a student and Colette was leaving Skidmore, and money was more valuable to us at the time. So we ended up getting like $5,000 or $6,000, which in those days was a ton of money. That
I
was
remember that in your
yeah,
tape
that was
too.
well, we gave them a couple $1,000, whatever it was. I don't know if it was like 750 or 1250 or 2,000. It was a significant chunk of the money out of the wedding gifts. And we never got it back, but we never asked for it back. And I'm not complaining about that, except to say, when you now read the book and see the movie and you see this doting grandmother baking for the kids and the kids running around and Mildred and Freddie saying, "God, if only," in flashbacks, they were running around. And Freddie and Mildred post Army hearing were saying, "Oh, if only the kids were here." And Freddie, in one point in the movie, Freddie says, "For heaven's sakes, will you stop cooking? There's enough for 10 people here." And Mildred says, "I have to. It's what always happened with the kids." That's like a dream. It's all a hallucination. That was not the relation.
She didn't bake.
She did bake, and she was a good cook. Surprised. I'm trying to tell you the absolute truth. She was a very good cook. But Mildred was not a doting grandmother. She was the absolute opposite end of the spectrum. It was like when one of the kids would open a Christmas gift, she would immediately run and collect every little piece of paper and the tape and the ribbons.
Yeah.
And it would, before the gift was out of the box, it was all clean. And Kimmy or Chris would be sitting there kind of looking at her like, "Can I play with it? Is it okay to play?" You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she would say, "Okay, the kids aren't allowed on the couch." They can go into the other room and play, but they can't sit on the couch. And Colette would look at me and just shake her head, and I mean, it was totally different. And I'm not complaining about how they were then. What I'm complaining about is the change. So they're now this hero. They have a view of themselves. They actually believe this now. I mean, when you watch Freddie on TV, he's so intense. I think he really believes what he's saying. Anyone who knows him can tell you what I'm telling. Anyone who went to their house. I mean, so anyway, I don't know what we're talking
I
about.
called him in Florida and I spoke with him and then I said, "Would your wife like to speak to me too?" And he said, "Well, no." He was speaking for both of them, and then he said, "Oh well." He said, "Well, Mildred, you want to speak to her?" So Mildred got on the phone and
Are they living in Florida now?
yeah, they've I guess retired to
Hmm.
somewhere in Florida.
Hmm.
Um, and I'll get to what she was telling me about, but the point I wanted to make now was that he very quickly got her off the phone. That
Uh-huh.
um,
Were they
that
drinking? That's probably why. He normally lets her talk, although he likes to be the center of attention, but normally he lets her talk unless there's been drinking.
she talked, and then she asked him something. I asked a question, and she didn't know whether she should answer it or not. So she asked him,
Okay.
and then he took the phone again. But was that their relationship that he was kind of in charge and in control, and she was a more
The truth
receiving?
is, she was always a strong person.
Mhm.
Freddie was, uh, my most honest view is that Mildred was always stronger than Freddie, but that she intentionally allowed him to act like he was directing the relationship. Financially, there's no question. Mildred held the reins. The money for the infamous clothing shop in Patchogue and the money for the Washington Square apartment all came from Mildred from the death settlement from her husband. Okay. I was told that over dinner by them. I'm not repeating anything that they said that to me.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
But and Mildred was always like a silent force, and Freddie was always the glib socializer. He was like a teddy bear. He was really delightful, and I mean that. He was delightful. We used to enjoy Freddie, especially if he had one or two drinks, because then he relaxed, and occasionally he'd loosen his tie. Okay, but Mildred never relaxed. I mean, she was always dressed perfectly for dinner. All the makeup was on, one child at a time. As a matter of fact, in the so-called segment of lies in the book, where Joe says no trip to the Caribbean island ever occurred after internship, and he's saying that I'm lying about that because he
yeah.
checked and found out that there was only one day between internship and my Army basic at Fort Sam Houston, Texas. Well, he's right. That vacation was 3 months earlier in March in my spring vacation as an intern. That's what happened.
Yeah.
That's that lie that he calls
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
But my point is, during that break, my mom took one of the children and Mildred took one of the children because Mildred wouldn't take both.
Yeah.
And Colette and I were laughing about it. We say, wouldn't it be easier if one of them took both? My mom would have gladly taken both, but then Freddie and Mildred would have acted hurt.
Mhm.
So we had to split up the kids. It was just, and finally, of course, what happened is what you would expect. By the end of the week, Mildred had given up the child she had. My mother had both of them anyway.
She sent the
She
other
sent
child
them over.
over.
In other words, she had other things to do. She had to go to New York, blah, 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 blah. And when we got back, both kids were with my mom and had been there for 2 days. My mom just smiled and shook her head. You know, I mean, that's how it was. And there was nothing antagonistic between Mildred and Colette and I, but this deep, abiding, close family, baking cookies and cakes and kids racing around, that never occurred. It was a totally different relationship. Totally different.
She told me that she had been with you for about a month and formed this idea that Colette was happy and that you were kind of somebody who I think what was more in the details. I think I read this in one of Keeler's pieces too. That you took the car while she had the.
Oh yeah, that's the new version. That version didn't exist in 1970, when she gave her statements to the CID and when Craig testified. Have you read his testimony? You got to read his testimony.
In what?
Kassab's testimony in the Article 32.
I haven't read the Article 32.
I mean, I would be happy. I would be delighted to send you Alfred Kassab's testimony. She didn't testify. She stayed home that day. He flew down, stayed 4 or 5 days, and testified, offering to do so, by the way. We didn't ask him. Okay. And she then became the foil because in 79, she hadn't testified, so she couldn't be cross examined on prior testimony. So she came forward and Freddie didn't testify at trial. Now in 79, she has exactly the opposite views. But if you go back to the reports when she was interviewed by Ivory and Shaw in 70, there's none of this stuff there. Now, clearly what happened is she made it up over time. I think she probably even believes it now, but initially she was clearly confabulating or lying on purpose.
I guess if you believe.
She was never there a month, first of all. The only time she was ever with us a month was in response to the second birth, the difficult birth in Chicago when Colette almost died. And she stayed with us in Chicago for a month. Colette was in the hospital for 10 of those days, and she came home, and it was a great visit in every single regard. It was the best time we ever had with Mildred. It was the only time Mildred ever really didn't talk about money, which drove Colette crazy, absolutely crazy. She never talked about money, and we just were real good family for that month. That's the only time she ever spent a month. What she's referring to is she spent a week at Christmas with us, and it was a great time. And you ought to read Kassab's testimony about that time because his testimony was true. I mean, it's really goody-goody about me. That's not why I'm telling you to read it. I'm telling you to read it because Kassab was speaking extemporaneously at the time when the memory was fresh, and I had been charged with these crimes. I had been in my room for 5 months. He had known every single thing that went on every day. Okay? Nothing was being held back from Freddie to Bernie Siegel's great dismay. He kept saying to me, Jeff, this guy is a nutcase. I said, he's my father-in-law, man. He's great. He's running around renting rooms at LaGuardia Airport when he couldn't get down and he held a press conference instead of coming for that day. Bernie kept saying, this is just like the fanatic that you see in the newspapers. These people are dangerous people. He is almost unstable in his total fanaticism for you right now. I mean, how could I understand that at the time? I said, Bernie, I said, are you nuts? This guy is great. He knows me. He's speaking out. Why shouldn't he do that? So I'm hushing up my attorney. 2 years later, I'm sitting in California reading these letters from the Kassabs, remembering Bernie's words.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we still on the question of Kassab's switch? I don't know if I ever said anything that meant anything to you. He said to me, or he said to many interviewers, that the break occurred because of what he found in the Article 32 transcript. Okay,
That's what it's in McGinnis'
that's what he
book.
said, right? And that's what's in McGinnis' book. And all I was saying, which got us off the track, was that I gave him that Article 32 transcript. I know every word that's in there, much more apparently than he and Joe does, because Joe misquotes it, and so does Freddie all the time. But I've also looked at Freddie's lists, and if you look at his list of things, they're ludicrous. I mean, the business about the candle and seeing the people's faces from lying on the couch where I was attacked, Colonel Rock did the exact thing. It's in the Article 32 transcript. Colonel Rock went in, had his legal advisor with him, had the CID with him, laid down, looked up without a candle, just with the 40-watt bulb on in the kitchen, and said, exactly, no problem. I see features. I can make out stripes on your sleeve. No problem at all. Got up and came back and made a report in Article 32 to us the next day. Now, Kassab says he studied that, every word, every line, and he found things, and that's one of his things. And everything he says is like that. In other words, if you went down his list of, what is it, 22 or 28, whatever it was, every one of his things is totally false. Now, I don't know if he was drinking himself into a stupor or believing what he was saying, but it's nonsensical stuff. What I think happened is very different than that. And I think it was a combination of my lie to him, okay, about finding one of the people, which I'm not at all proud of, but it happened. Okay. I think I have a rationale for it, but it doesn't sound so good 18 years later. And I think he was wooed very heavily by Peter Kearns. Peter Kearns on the CID reinvestigation. Remember,